Hey guys, I hope you guys are having a good night with your family, good time at home. Obviously, things are a little different right now. So we're going to be switching some things up in the coming week or month maybe. I don't even know. But things are going to be a little bit different lately, but I still want us to be a church. I still want us to be a youth group. And so tonight we're going to be continuing in Genesis. We're going to continue doing our Genesis study, and I've actually gone and recorded the lesson for tonight and what we were going to be talking about so that you guys can join in with me as we talk about Genesis and as we talk about Noah and what God has done through Noah and his life, so that we can be that youth group together. We can still learn, we can still study, we can still encourage and work through this together with each other. So I want to be encouraging you guys to stay in communication with each other, text each other, talk to each other, hop on Xbox or whatever with each other. Let's still continue to encourage one another, love each other, and be that youth group away from youth group. I miss you guys, and I wish we could be hanging out tonight. And I'm bummed we can't, and I'm bummed I missed you guys on Sunday too. And with that said, if y'all need anything, if y'all need to talk or just to catch up, give me a call. I'm here for you guys, and I want to keep in contact with you guys too. So I miss y'all, and hopefully we'll get to see each other soon. But for the meantime, we'll just have some digital youth group. How about that? I love y'all, and talk to you soon. All right, so let's jump back into our Genesis study. We're going to do a little recap just like on normal Wednesday nights. So let's think back to what we've talked about so far. So Genesis 1 and 2, we have creation, right? We have God creating the world, God creating order, and God filling that created order. God filling the stars and the heavens with the birds, the sea with the fish, and the land with livestock and with us. In Genesis 3, that creation doesn't go the way that God intended it for it to go, and man sins. We fall, and so we have the fall. We have the rebellion of mankind. And in chapter 4, that rebellion continues on, and just like the sins of Adam and Eve, their descendant Cain even furthers that rebellion and murders for the first time. And we have the story of Cain and Abel. And just like Cain was the descendant of Adam and was supposed to be like this, the new, it reflected Adam in a lot of ways. Just like his father, we see him fall as well. And so this cycle, we also will see this cycle play out through Genesis of new Adams, in a sense, being created and then falling. We'll actually see that next week when we look at Noah and how he is viewed as this new Adam, which we'll talk about tonight, and how he falls short of that as well. Genesis chapter 5, Cain's descendants. We see how his descendants further echo this cycle of rebellion, and how Cain, when if he was avenged, he would be avenged 7 times over, and his descendant Lamech comes back and he says, my family line, and Cain, if he was avenged, it would be 7 times, but I tell you, it'll be 77 times if someone avenges me. And then he even boasts about a young man striking him, and he kills him for it. And so he goes above and beyond what any rational person would do, and escalates this violence to a new level. And we can see that Lamech's descendants even continue that violence with the first artificer or the first forger of war tools, of weapons. And so he continues this cycle of descending into chaos and violence. And then we have chapter 6. Chapter 6 was a weird one. We talked about the Nephilim and how they were kind of a weird story in the Bible of people, of beings, these Nephilim being created, and they were elevated either to positions of power or the people around them were drawn to them, and what never should have taken place, these Nephilim that should have never been created, people were elevating them when they shouldn't have been, and instead of looking to Yahweh, instead of looking to God, they were putting their faith and trust in these Nephilim and in these powerful men, powerful people. So we have the Nephilim, and this kind of echoes just the general corruption that was going on in the world. There was so much corruption, and it continued to be more and more corrupt every day. And so we begin to see the beginning of the flood. God warns Noah that this is coming, and he gives him the instruction to go and prepare. And so this is kind of the start of the flood. And then in 7 and 8, we get to kind of the full story of the flood. And that's where we're going to pick up here tonight, starting in Genesis 8, verse 20. This is the part of the story where the waters have just subsided. Noah steps out onto dry land, and he's no longer in the ark anymore, but he is starting his new life in this new place on an earth that is him and his family are the only ones there. So let's look at that, and let's see what Genesis 8:20 says. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and took some of every clean animal and some of every clean bird, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I again strike down every living creature as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night, it shall not cease. So what's the first thing Noah does when he gets off the ark? He builds this altar. He builds the altar for the purpose of a sacrifice, for worship. So Noah builds an altar, and then he sacrifices on it. But it's not just any sacrifice, right? We've seen sacrifices already in the Old Testament with Cain and Abel, and we saw that Cain's sacrifice was not very good, yet Abel's was the best he had. And so we see that here with Noah, that when Noah gets off the ark, he offers all of the clean animals. And I don't mean he offered every single clean animal that was on the ark, but he offered every type of clean animal. And so he was sacrificing the best of what he had, the best that was available to him, even though there wasn't a whole lot to offer. He gave his best. He gave all that he could, and he gave the best of what he could. And so Noah, when he sacrificed, he gave the best sacrifice he could. And it's really cool. This phrase comes up. It says that when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, right? So it's weird to think that the Lord smells, that the Lord could smell what was going on here, and the Lord could smell these sacrifices. But here's the thing: I don't think the Lord is talking about how good the cooked birds and the cooked clean animals smelled. I don't think that's what's going on here. I think what's happening is that the Lord is seeing the heart of Noah. Because Noah gets off the ark, and the first thing he does is he worships and thanks his Lord and his Savior. And that is pleasing to the Lord. It's like a pleasing aroma. You know, when you're at home and maybe you're sleeping in one day and you wake up to the smell of bacon and pancakes and eggs cooking in the kitchen, and you hop up out of bed because you know what's waiting for you. You know that there's this good thing that's going to greet you when you get to the kitchen, right? Which is loads and loads of food, good smelling food. And so you know that this good thing is waiting for you when you get there. And I think that's what God is experiencing, is that he sees Noah sacrificing and worshiping, and he knows the goodness in Noah's heart in that moment. And that's what's pleasing to the Lord. And so this pleasing aroma is not the smell of burning animals, but it's the smell of worship. It's the smell of giving God the glory and honor that he deserves. And that's what's so pleasing to the Lord. In fact, we see this in other places in Scripture too, even in the New Testament. And in the New Testament, in Ephesians chapter 5, verses 1 through 2, it says this: "Therefore, be imitators of God as beloved children, and walk in love as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God." See, this is the pleasing aroma. It is giving something up for the Lord, sacrificing, honoring God, and worshiping God. This pleasing aroma, and just as it describes Christ as this pleasing aroma to God in his sacrifice, we get to join in that. And when we sacrifice and when we love others and we walk in the same way that Jesus walked, that our lives become this this pleasing aroma to the Lord. So we've talked about how there's this cycle of new Adams that come around. We have these examples of people who are supposed to be this new generation of people leading and starting this new life with God, and we've seen that just like Cain and Abel, how they were descendants of Adam, and were supposed to be these leaders in this new world, this new way of living, that they fell short of that by a long shot, or Cain fell short of that by a long shot. And so we kind of have this second example of a new Adam, a new creation in Noah. And so Noah reflects Adam in a lot of ways. One way that Noah and Adam are alike is that they're both in this new world, this new creation, right? So Adam, when he left the garden, he left into a world that, into a place that he was unfamiliar. It was new territory for him. He wasn't in the garden anymore. And so this was a new way of life, a new place for Adam. And similarly to Noah, Noah stepped out of the ark into a new place, a place he had never been before, into a life he had no idea what was waiting for him. And so he steps out into this new place, this new world. We also see that that these guys were the only people, right? Them and their families were the only inhabitants. And so they're kind of this new family that starts populating the rest of the world. And that kind of leads us into the next thing, in just a little while. Both of them originally were counted righteous, right? So Noah was a righteous man. That's why God chose him to be on the ark, to continue humankind and to be the one that further populates the world. Same thing with Adam. Adam, when they were originally created, they walked with God. They were with God in the garden. And before that relationship was messed up in Genesis 3 in the fall, Adam had this relationship with God that he was designed to have. was counted righteous. He was blameless. And so both of them are similar in that they were righteous. So just like they were the only inhabitants, they also have this command to go and multiply and fill the earth. And so in chapter 9, 1 and 7, we're not going to read it because we're going to get to it in just a little while. But they have this command to fill the earth, to multiply and fill the earth. They both have the exact same command by God. We also see that Noah is given dominion of animals after he sacrifices, and after God tells him to go fill the earth. He also says you can take and eat of any animal on the world, and he kind of gives this caveat that he says now animals are going to be afraid of you, but you're also able to eat them. And so God gives Noah dominion over the animals, just like he gave Adam dominion over the animals in the garden. So they both echo these things of having authority or having dominion over animals. Later on, next week, we're going to be talking about how Noah messes up and how he falls short of this new Adam, this new creation cycle. And when we look at that, we're going to see in chapter 10, verse 20, that Noah starts a garden. Noah starts a vineyard. And so he was in this garden or vineyard type place, just like Adam was. Adam starting in the garden, and Noah creating a garden, creating a vineyard. And even more than that, in the next verse, in chapter 10, verses 21 through 25, we get this story of Noah getting drunk from his vineyard, laying in his tent naked, and actually one of his sons coming in and embarrassing him. And so he is naked and ashamed, and that echoes exactly what Adam was like in the garden. After they ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, both him and Eve were naked and ashamed, and so they hid. Just like Noah, he was naked and ashamed in his vineyard. So when we look at all these things, they're parallel to one another. They echo each other so much, and so when we read this story about Noah in chapters 9 and 10, and at the very end of chapter 8, when we read this story of Noah, it reminds the reader of Adam. It reminds the reader of what creation was always intended to be, and that's what the flood was supposed to do. The flood was this chance for humanity to leave its wicked ways and to return to this relationship that we were supposed to have with God from the very beginning. And that's what we see echoed in Noah, just like we saw it in Adam, but we know when we get there, we're going to fall short again. We also see that Noah echoes one other person, that Noah echoes Christ. He parallels Christ. So Noah and Christ. All right, so when we look at Noah, we see that Noah was a righteous man. He was righteous in the middle of wickedness. And so everything around him, the world was a wicked place. It was filled with wicked people. It was filled with violence and fighting and killing and murder. Yet Noah was counted righteous. That's why he was chosen for the ark. Christ was the exact same way. He was a righteous man, blameless, sinless, in a wicked world, in a world that rejected him and ended up killing him on the cross because they wouldn't listen to him, because they rejected him. So Noah and Christ are similar in this way. We also see that Noah, in a sense, he overcame death. Noah was in this place on the ark where everything around him, other than his family, was dying or dead. Yet Noah survived. And so Noah kind of beat or defeated death in a sense. Now it was God saving him. It was God working through Noah. It was God who gave Noah the instructions to build the ark and to be safe and to continue that humanity and continue mankind in the world. But Noah is a part of that. So Noah, as everything else around the world is dying, Noah survives. Noah lives. Christ, in an even greater sense, when he was crucified on the cross, he was buried, but we know he was raised to life a few days later. And so Christ defeated death, overcame death by dying and being raised to life again. So they're similar in that way as well. And then we also see that Noah, when he steps off the ark and he builds this altar and he starts worshiping the Lord, then the Lord smells this pleasing aroma, and then he decides, hey, I'm going to make this new covenant with Noah and all the peoples of the earth. And so when Noah steps out of the ark, he gets this new covenant. This new promise. And we're going to talk about this word and what this covenant is in just a second. But we see that Noah and Christ both share this creation of a new covenant. Now in Noah, we're gonna see exactly what that is here in just a second. But Christ, when he came, he established this new covenant with his people in that he made us new creations. He said that by Jesus, by Christ coming, that he was the one to fulfill the law, and he was the one that through him all peoples could come to know God, come to that original intent relationship that we have been craving as mankind, as creation ever since Genesis 1 and 2. And Jesus comes to reestablish that connection with the Lord and give us that avenue of speaking and being with our God, with Yahweh. So Christ also creates this new covenant, this new contract, his promise. But obviously Noah and Christ are also different. So when we look at Noah, right, we see that Noah he ended up, like we're going to see next week, he ended up failing, just like all of these people before him, and he ends up sinning and continuing in wickedness, continuing introducing wickedness back into the world. When we look at Christ, we obviously know he's perfect, he's sinless. Noah, when we look at Noah's situation, well, what happened in the flood? Noah was the righteous one, yet all the wicked died. And so in Noah's case, we have the wicked died, and the righteous were saved. But when we look at Jesus, we see that the righteous one died, and the wicked are now saved. And so these comparisons between Noah and Christ are not the exact same, right? The one, obviously, Christ is also compared to this new Adam, but he's the perfect version. He is God come as man, as creation, to reestablish what we were always supposed to have with God in Genesis 1 and 2, which is a relationship with him. So this is how Noah and Christ are a lot alike. And this new covenant, this is what we're going to focus on now. So I'm going to read chapter 9, verses 1 through 17, and we're going to talk about what this new covenant is and what that means for us today. And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth and upon every bird of the heavens, upon everything that creeps on the ground and all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are delivered, and every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. And as I give you the green plants, I give you everything. But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. And for your lifeblood I will require a reckoning. From every beast I will require it, and from man. From his fellow man I will require a reckoning for the life of man. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed, for God made man in his own image. And you, be fruitful and multiply, increase greatly on the earth, and multiply in it." And then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, "Behold, I establish my covenant with you and your offspring after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, and every beast of the earth with you, as many as came out of the ark. It is for every beast of the earth. I establish my covenant with you, that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, This is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you, for all future generations. I have set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. And when I bring clouds over the earth, and the bow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant that is between me and you, and every living creature of all flesh. And the waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth." God said to Noah, "This is the sign of the covenant that I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth." So this is the covenant that God establishes with Noah. We call it, and this is kind of weird to say, the Noahic, just like we have the Mosaic and the Davidic, the Noahic covenant. And what this covenant says is that God promises never again to bring a flood, never again to destroy all of mankind, all of humankind. And so what this Noahic covenant says is that God promises no more destruction, no more complete destruction of mankind. He's no longer going to wipe away everyone on the earth, and he's not going to bring this great flood again to the peoples. And so God promises no more complete destruction. Right? He's not going to bring a flood or anything else and destroy mankind in the way that he did in Genesis 6 through 8. So no more complete destruction. But there's a second part of this covenant, and you can see it at the end of chapter 8 when he says, "I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth." And so even as God looks on the heart of man, he knows that man is wicked and sinful. Right? He knows that they're going to mess up again. He knows that they're going to sin again. And he knows exactly this cycle that's going to keep happening of mankind rebelling against God, drawing close to God, rebelling against God, drawing close. It's going to happen over and over and over again, not just in Genesis, but all throughout the Old Testament. He knows that mankind is going to be wicked even after this reset of the earth. And yet he still chooses to make this promise to his people. So let's talk about this word covenant. This word covenant, a lot of times we think of as promise, but it's kind of even further than that. It is a promise, but it's also kind of like a contract. And so it's a contract between God and his people. And so this covenant that God is making, by making this covenant, this contract with Noah and all peoples of the land, what he's doing is he's renegotiating the terms of the relationship between mankind and God. This is a new partnership. This is a new way of mankind and God interacting with one another. And this new interaction comes in this form that no longer, even though man is wicked, that God knows man is wicked, that man is going to continue in wickedness, that God is promising not to destroy mankind again the same way he did in the flood. He's renegotiating the terms of mankind interacting with God. And he does this, right? The sign of this is in a rainbow. He puts this sign in the sky to signify and for him and Israel and Noah's family to remember that when this bow is in the sky, when this rainbow is in the sky, that the rains are not going to continue forever, but the rains will stop, and that there won't be another flood just like there was in Genesis 6-8. And so it's kind of like a calming sign, a sign of remembrance for Noah and his family not to panic when it rains, not to think back to the times of chaos and the times of the flood, but to remember God's provision in their life, that God is no longer promising to destroy them, no matter how sinful and no matter how wicked they become, that God is still in a partnership with them, and God is still active in continuing that partnership with them, even though he knows their heart is sinful. That's a pretty cool thing. And so this reminder, this sign in the sky was a time for Noah and later the Israelites and for us to reflect on the good things God has given us in our life, to remember that God is still in control and he's still in partnership with us through these covenants, these promises and contracts of God. And that this specific contract is one that says God knows our hearts, and yet he still wants to pursue us. He still wants that relationship with us. I think that's pretty comforting. So I know that was a little bit different than what we usually do, but I hope that made sense. I hope you guys were able to follow along, and I also have a few questions for you guys, so I'm going to post those on the webpage. And I also want to encourage you guys, after you get done looking at those, go and talk to your parents and pray with them. Since we're not praying together and closing out tonight, why don't you go and just pray with them tonight. So hope you guys had a good night, and hope I get to see you guys soon. Love y'all.